today's scam awareness video, we're going to look in detail at a few of the scams I've been seeing in ads here on YouTube and elsewhere, and also discuss a little bit of psychology that I think scammers are using to make people walk into being scammed when they should probably know better. To begin, I've been seeing these ads for supposedly Viking-style clothing everywhere, featuring mostly AI-generated or enhanced footage of people wearing highly decorated sculptured knitwear and fabrics. As I say, I'm sure a lot or perhaps all of this is AI-generated imagery and footage. At some point, it's probably going to become pointless talking about that, since the realism gap is closing steadily. It used to be that you could tell something was AI just by counting the fingers or looking for background detail, but it's not that simple anymore. I think these are AI generated though, because for one thing the body proportions of some of these models are a little bit beyond the extreme of realism, but also there were moments where parts of their bodies or clothing phased in or out of existence, or where the applique wolves on the clothing accidentally appeared animated, and other little tells like that. And I think maybe the scammers realised this too, as the ads were initially entirely made up of moving footage, but evolved into a format with a couple of brief moving scenes, and then a slideshow of static images. On the ads there is background music composing a dramatic rendition of a song called Valhalla Calling. I've had to dub a lot of the audio out on these clips because of copyright. There are also details about the patterns of the clothing that just don't make sense in terms of actual knitted stitches. I don't know how to describe this properly, but people who know about knitting will understand what I mean. Some of these knits just aren't plausible. So is this just me hating on generative AI? Why does it even matter if they're AI generated? Good question. It matters because these products supposedly for sale on the websites don't exist. They're fake, so you're buying a product that looks like it might be pretty good value for the price, but the scammers don't even have such a product. The ads all went to a variety of hastily set up Shopify stores with nearly identical layouts and products. I'm guessing the scammers have to keep spawning new shops when they get shut down or banned by their payment processor. What you'd get if you buy this stuff is probably a cheap screen-printed hoodie or other garment with a design that ever so slightly superficially resembles the thing depicted in the ad, like it might have a wolf on it, but not a luxurious, chunky, sculptured, knitted thing. Just to note, as always, I will not be test purchasing any of these scams because this series is not about that. In fact, it's about the opposite. It's about recognising when something is a scam before you actually have to buy it and get scammed. I wrote that last part before searching to see if anybody had actually bought this stuff and posted about it, and it looks as though I was right. People buying this stuff receive cheap printed hoodies and t-shirts from a dropship fulfillment supplier, so if you want one of those you could probably get it cheaper on AliExpress or something. But it won't be one of those chunky Viking robes you see in those videos because those don't exist for sale, certainly not at those prices. Here's another ad about a drain unblocking product, clearly using AI-generated video. This must be an older version of generated video because this footage is filled with obvious tells, such as the water flowing everywhere except down the drain hole, this person fiddling with it with their bare hands for no reason, then it dissolves moss, this one where an implausibly large amount of water flows down a tiny plug hole, oh, and another one of those. And then this one where somebody pours it in one end of a bath and it starts foaming and seething at the other end too, after which all of the dirty water just sort of teleports away. Next is this ad for a bracelet called the Spirilet, which if I could play the audio, the enthusiastic presenter would tell you it triggers a chemical reaction in your subconscious, not a thing, and causes you to manifest 100 times faster. That last part may be actually true because 100 times 0 is still 0. Anyway, this bracelet they're selling for £22 on their website, supposedly reduced from £37, and which is really just a zodiac sign bracelet, is just a cheap trinket. How do I know that? Because the same item is offered for sale for pennies from a load of different sellers on AliExpress. So whilst £22 might have seemed cheap, it's obviously not even worth £1. But wait, don't you realise this bracelet is worn by every major celebrity? For example, here's Dwayne Johnson wearing his. And here's the original version of that photo, which appears to have one important difference. Can you spot it? But it has a money-back guarantee. If at any point you don't feel its powerful energy working on you, you can return it and get your money back. No questions asked. So what have you got to lose? More than you might imagine. We'll come back to that. There's a bit of wibble about scarcity and how you should act now, and supply is limited, but if you buy one, you'll get another one free. One of those things is not like the other. Next, this ad for some sort of hair restorer featuring this weird little generated clip, and there's not really a lot to say about this one except that it makes a bold claim about effectiveness. If you use this stuff for 2 weeks and no new hair grows, they will compensate you $20,000. In reality, if they send you anything, it's just going to be a bottle of shampoo that does pretty much nothing any other shampoo doesn't do, and certainly doesn't do this. I mean, why would you even want that? And in case you're wondering if there's some technical legal wriggle they would use to avoid paying out the $20,000 compensation, there is a much simpler answer. The compensation promise is just a lie. They're lying. Their guarantee means absolutely nothing. They have no intention of fulfilling any such guarantee. And this is a theme I keep seeing, is the promise of a money-back guarantee if you're not satisfied. We saw it on the robot puppy scam, and we'll see it in quite a few of the ads on the video today. There's a little bit more to this than meets the eye. It's not just a statement about customer service. I think it's a little bit of subtle psychological programming. Consider three broad groups of people. In the first group, you've got people who immediately perceive these things as scams. They're not likely to become victims of these particular scams because their guard is up from the outset. If you're in that group, well done, but as I've often said, just because you recognise some scams as obvious, you probably shouldn't imagine yourself to be invulnerable to every possible angle of attack, because that's when the guard comes down. Anyway, at the other end of the spectrum, there's a group of people who, for whatever reason, are very susceptible to these scams. They see an ad for a tiny magic electronic device that supposedly defrosts your car, and they believe it, or maybe they just don't know how to disbelieve it. But this group of people falls victim to the scams, immediately, often repeatedly. But in the middle, there's a group of people who see a thing, maybe get initially wowed by it, then suspicion kicks in. They start thinking, hang on a minute, that sounds a little bit too good to be true, doesn't it? This is far too good value, or it makes extraordinary claims. So these are people who are at risk of being scammed, but in most cases, their suspicion causes them to cross the line into the group that recognises that thing as a scam. But then a couple of things happen. The first of these is that the stated pricing of the thing seems cheap enough to be worth a punt. They figure maybe it's too good to be true, but nothing ventured, nothing gained, and it's only a few quid lost. If it turns out to be the scam, I suspect it might be. The second thing is that the scam promises a full and prompt refund if you're not satisfied. And this promise, I think, in many cases, is enough to get people to cross back over that line and order the thing. The promise of a refund seems, for some people, to win a little bit of trust where no trust is deserved or warranted.
We promise a 14-day free trial, with a full refund if you are not satisfied. If the results are inaccurate, we will provide 10 times the compensation.
But that promise of a refund is just a lie. The scammers have absolutely no intention of honouring any refund requests. Indeed, by the time the victim realises they have been duped, the website they ordered from has very often vanished, either shut down by the web host or just abandoned by the scammers, who've moved on and set up shop somewhere else for the next round. How do I know this? Well, because numerous people have contacted me asking for my assistance or advice in getting their promised refund. Some of them told me they were initially happy to throw a small amount of money at what seemed a bit suspicious, but then they discovered they'd been charged a different amount, or had been charged multiple times, so they'd lost more money than they actually initially thought they were risking, and now they're trying to invoke the refund promise to get that money back. So this video today is really, I suppose, for that middle group of people. If you've seen a thing that you thought seemed too good to be true, or just seemed like amazing good value, or a huge technological leap, or that impressed or surprised you, and you started thinking that maybe it was worth the risk of that small outlay, on the off chance that it might be real, or maybe somewhat real, or a little bit exaggerated, this is your wake-up call. If you suspect that they might be lying about the product, why would you trust the guarantee about the refund? Except now that I think about it, maybe there aren't three distinct groups of people like I described a moment ago. Maybe these three divisions are really more like the spectrum represented by you when you're at your best, and you when you're having a really bad day, and then you in the middle where you're on the fence. Everybody probably finds some scams obvious, and everybody probably has vulnerabilities perhaps they don't know about. And then in the middle, everyone is susceptible to psychological manipulation of some sort. Not necessarily in the same way as I've described here, but if you think these things are obvious, it doesn't mean you're immune to all other attacks. On the subject of it being a very small risk because of the low value, it's very common for these scams to abuse your payment details. In some cases, in fact many cases, the secure payment portal you see on these web shops is not actually part of a payment processing system at all. It's often just a form that captures your card details for the scammers to charge differently later or charge multiple times. And a refund promise from a con artist is worthless. Of course, if you paid for one of these scams using a credit card, that does provide a layer of protection and a chargeback guarantee, although I'd say it's still not a reason to breeze confidently into a transaction like these, just because sharing your payment and address details with a scammer is something that has potential downstream implications that are a bit broader than simply getting one dodgy transaction reversed. In some cases, the scammers will sit on that data and then make spurious charges later when perhaps you're not looking. Anyway, back to the scam ads. This one I mentioned earlier. For a tiny device that you stick inside your car and it supposedly melts the ice on the car because
violent movement of electromagnetic molecules,
or maybe
solar energy principle.
This isn't the first time I've seen devices that claim to do that. In a previous iteration of this scam, the actual device you could get would be a little solar-powered fan that was actually intended to disperse air freshener. BigClive did a takedown of those. Link here and in the description. But this one here is just a little anonymous gadget. So could something like this even work? No, it definitely could not. Let's just do a little bit of really rough estimation here. Let's assume that car has 1 kilogram of snow and ice on it. It's probably more than that, but let's be generous and say it's only 1 kilogram. Let's also say that that ice is only just below the freezing point of water, so the only energy required is that which will change the phase from solid to liquid. So let's assume it doesn't need additional heat to warm it up from really deep sub-zero temperatures. The amount of energy needed to melt ice is 334 joules per gram. A kilo is 1,000 grams, so we need 334,000 joules. The most compact portable energy storage medium we know is hydrocarbons, such as petroleum spirit, so petrol, gasoline, and that contains about 46 megajoules per kilogram. So divide one of those numbers by the other, and it turns out in ideal conditions you would only need 7 grams of petrol to melt 1 kilo of ice, assuming ideal conditions. But this thing isn't powered by petrol, it has a little rechargeable lithium battery in it, and the energy density of batteries is way lower than hydrocarbon fuels, about 500 joules per gram in rechargeable batteries. So this thing would need a battery weighing about 700 grams in order to provide sufficient energy to melt just 1 kilo of ice that was on the point of melting on its own, that is. And there's no workaround for this, there's no magical science vibrations that will make the process of melting ice more energy efficient than it is. In the real world, which is usually far from ideal, there might be more than a kilo of ice on your car, and it might be colder than just below the melting point, and batteries aren't perfect either. So any kind of realistic device here would have to be a box about the size of a toaster at least. Just no way that tiny little box could contain the energy needed to melt more than a couple of ice cubes, and that's ignoring the fact that the method by which it's claimed to work is completely bogus anyway. A couple of other scams that people specifically asked me about. One was a free TV streaming box that claims with only a small one-time payment you can enjoy streaming TV from Amazon, Sky, Disney Plus and other subscription services free for life. Again, it's just a lie. What people got when they ordered this, and this should be a really familiar story by this point, is a thing that did not live up to the promises. In one case, a friend of our family ordered one of these, and when it turned up it was just a random empty plastic project box with some unrecognisable cables glued into it. It did nothing at all. In other cases I've heard about, people did receive a really cheap and poor performing Android TV box, but it didn't have any special lifetime streaming setup because that doesn't exist. I mean, maybe there are ways to illicitly obtain streamed TV services without paying the subscriptions, but there is no official cheap one-off lifetime payment subscription deal. The other thing was these earbuds that claim to be able to do real-time voice-to-voice language translation, which isn't all that far-fetched to claim these days. The technology to translate languages fairly quickly does exist, and it's pretty usable, and you can do it on your phone. But this product was marketed as a standalone set of translation earbuds that just work. No other devices or subscriptions required. What people got when they ordered this, can you guess? Again, something that didn't live up to the promises. They got a pair of very ordinary cheap Bluetooth earbuds and a printed QR code that went to a translation app that offers a month's free trial, and then after that is a paid subscription. And in some cases those customers were charged more than they expected or were charged multiple times. Here's one more before we go. Almost certainly a scam of some sort, and again the product imagery and video is AI generated.
This is going to be the last day to get it for crazy prices like this. If you want to get this, make sure you add it to your cart and go all the way to the checkout because TikTok will automatically apply your coupon. This is going to be the last day to get it for crazy prices like this.
You can tell because this thing is supposedly a Santa wall sticker. It's added a three-dimensional effect to a flat vinyl sticker. Again, the point of mentioning this is not to rag on generative AI specifically, although I'm not a great fan, but rather to kick off a thought process. This thing is supposedly just a printed vinyl wall sticker. Why wouldn't they just shoot a bit of video of the actual product? I mean, maybe some legitimate reasons hidden away there somewhere, but the most likely explanation, in my opinion, is that the real product, if there even is one, is probably more disappointing to look at than these generated images. I imagine you'll get a sticker of some sort because these can be made and shipped for pennies, and whilst here charging a fair bit more than pennies. And again, maybe abusing your payment details and personal information as well. But the reason they're using generated footage is the short, rapid life cycle of these scams. The scammers are pumping these scams out one after another really quickly. They don't have time to go and set up a studio and record footage of the actual product, especially when they're lying about how good the product actually is. And that real footage would be just disappointing. So there's a definite pattern emerging here. Some people have summarized it, maybe a little bit cynically, as if you see an ad online, it's a scam. That is a little bit of an exaggeration, but not by much. If you see an ad for a thing that looks enticing or exciting or novel or slightly surprising, if it seems like really good value, if it promises a lot, especially if it promises a one-time payment for something that's usually a subscription, if it makes an unnecessary, explicit, reassuring promise about refunds or compensation, if the only shots of the product are AI generated, these are all red flags that it is very likely a scam of some sort. I'm genuinely a bit sad that we've arrived at this place. The internet is a phenomenon that came into existence fully within my lifetime, and I've seen it change from a quirky little club for weird arts to a thriving marketplace for the exchange of ideas and products and services, towards now a feeding trough brimming with awful slop. Oh well, I suppose I should maybe acknowledge that my view on this might be a little bit skewed because of the number of people who contact me for help once they've already been scammed, and where there really isn't much I can do to help, except tell them to talk to their bank or credit card company, or in some cases the police. And I suppose that's part of my motivation for making this series, to try to get people to realise that blundering into trouble, then looking for a way to undo it, is not ideal. It's better to try not to do the thing in the first place, and not to assume that there even is a simple undo for trouble that you willingly gallop headlong into. Anyway, that's all I have for this video. Thanks for watching, stay safe from scams, and I hope to see you again soon.